Hello and welcome to the Wakbada Bassett Creek Oral History Podcast, where our guests discuss ways that they and other Indigenous peoples have lived, worked, and played in the Wakbada watershed for thousands of years. This project was created in Minnesota Makoche, or Minnesota, the traditional and contemporary homelands of the Dakota people. The project was co-led by Dr. Casey Keeler and Crystal Boyd, with support from community partners. More information is included at the end of this episode. On behalf of everyone who contributed to this project, thank you for tuning in.
Well, good afternoon. I am joined today by Debbi Williams for the Wakbada Bassett Creek Oral History Project. Good afternoon, Debbi.
Good afternoon.
So, at what point in your life were you living or working in the Golden Valley Bassett Creek region?
I moved there when I first became pregnant with my first child. I moved there as a safe area to raise kids. I looked at the different school districts and their Indian Ed programs. I had come to the Twin Cities. I moved to Minnesota because of the amount of programs that they had here. And then when I chose which area to move to for my kids, I chose that area specifically because of the Indian Ed programs and the programs they had in the district. And that was why I moved there.
Where did you move from?
I came here from Michigan.
Okay.
In 1980.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had come up here on vacation, and they had so many things here that we had a newspaper. They had an Indian center that actually had walls, and didn't have mice running through it. It had all of these organizations, and things that you could do. It was just really impressed with the amount of things that there were. So I turned around and moved back up here a few weeks later.
Oh, wow.
I went back home and I trained for the census and transferred my training up here. So I had a job to move to, and I came up here and enumerated the Native community.
Oh, wow.
Complete enumeration that they'd ever had.
Oh my gosh, I'm so interested in hearing more about this. So where was home for you in Michigan before coming to Minnesota?
At that point, I was living in Lansing.
Okay.
But yeah, I was living in teaching in Lansing. So that was the part where I came from then. I had grown up, we moved around a lot when I was growing up.
So you came to the Twin Cities and to the Robbinsdale School District because it was a good place to raise your kids.
I moved to the Robbinsdale District in 83.
Okay. Where were you living? Were you living in Robbinsdale then?
I lived in Plymouth, in an apartment in Plymouth, and then I bought a house on the Crystal New Hope border, and I lived there for 22 years. Raised kids, we lived there.
Such a nice area. I mentioned that I grew up in Coon Rapids, but when I was a graduate student at the University of Minnesota, I lived in Crystal, right on the Robbinsdale border, from about 2012 to 2017. But it's an interesting area because these communities are so small. Golden Valley, Crystal, New Hope, Robbinsdale, they're all just kind of intertangled.
Yeah, they are, but they each have their own little festivals and their own little identities too. So that was really unique to discover once I moved out there.
Right, I agree. I think about my time there very fondly. So you mentioned you came to this area, to the Robbinsdale School District, and your children went to and that was something that was really important to you for education reasons. So what were your thoughts on the Robbinsdale Indian Education Program? Is that something that your children really enjoyed?
Well, I think they did. They really enjoyed, because I was really active. I started the Robbinsdale Drum and Dance group when my daughter was in first grade, and my son, they were a year apart in school. So when she was in first grade, he was still in, he hadn't started school yet. Mm-hmm. So when she was in second grade, then he was in kindergarten.
Okay.
She started to put her in the immersion program. But when she was in first grade, that's when I started the Robbinsdale Drum and Dance group.
Okay.
Then I ran that for, I forget how many years, and got other people involved, but there had to be like a main catalyst person. So I did that for many years. Think about 9. Then then there was another woman there. Then she took over, when it was time for me to move on and do other things. And she took over running that group. So, I was very active in the parenting committee. So my kids were very active in the Indian Ed program there. And we had the powwows. We had a Robbinsdale powwow. And, my kids would go with me when I would go around teaching at the different schools, and dance for the schools, especially my daughter. She was a jingle dress dancer, and she really liked going, to the different schools and doing presentations and stuff. So we were really involved in that, in the school and in the education part. I was a teacher. One of the things I was doing in Michigan was teaching. And I was a Head Start teacher and also teaching at the Y and teaching different classes that I developed. So for me to do that and then to bring that here and start teaching when my kids were little, classes that they could be part of, it just was second nature kind of thing for me to do.
And I guess I would think that would also help build a sense of community for you there, especially arriving from Michigan.
It did, yeah. We did. We had the people there. There's still people from that group that call me auntie. There's still kids that I'm still in contact with, which is really nice. I mean, that is very much a sense of community. And there's still other parents that I worked with that I still am in contact with, So we do have that sense of community from them, and we still see them maybe at ceremonies. We go to a lot of ceremonies between Red Lake and St. Croix, so we still see people that were from the Robbinsdale group, so that sense of community has always stuck with us, even though my kids have graduated and I'm raising grandkids now.
Right. You mentioned your daughter attended an immersion school for a bit, or an immersion program?
Yeah, she did the whole time she was in Robbinsdale.
Oh, I didn't know they had that. Was that for language, culture?
Yeah, it was a Spanish immersion program.
Okay.
She attended that. They had that the whole time that she was there. She graduated from that. So then when she was in college, there were classes that she could take in Spanish and get double credit.
Okay.
She'd take like history, but she'd take it in Spanish. So she'd get history credit and Spanish credit. Wow. So she's multilingual because I grew up speaking Ojibwe and French.
Wow.
She grew up speaking Spanish to an immersion program.
Wow, that's really amazing. When you said immersion at first, I was wondering if it was an Ojibwe language immersion, but Spanish, I suppose, makes sense. Well, that's great that she had that opportunity, and then she also was so familiar with Ojibwe in the home as well.
Yeah, yeah. Like even this dog too, they're all we're chained in Ojibwe, so the kids practice Ojibwe, in interacting with the dogs or their animals,
Wow.
So I still kept this one. When we adopted this dog, he came from Redcliffe.
Oh, okay, in Wisconsin.
Yeah, from Wisconsin. So he was already an Ojibwe-speaking dog.
That is amazing.
So it's been cool to continue that, with my grandson and keep him more immersed in the language, and he recognizes it, So
I don't think I've ever heard of anybody speaking to their pets in Ojibwe before.
Really?
No, I've never even thought about it. But I guess if you're speaking the language in your home, then naturally the animals probably pick up on it just like they do English over time.
Yeah, ambe, nabadaba, sit down, nabadaba, it's good, I think, to keep that going like that.
So, are you a fluent Ojibwe speaker?
Not as fluent, no. Not totally fluent. I used to be more fluent, but not as much as I used to be.
Yeah.
No.
You mentioned, I know when we were texting a little bit, that you were able to do some Zoom language classes online.
My adopted mom, she was teaching Zoom. Well, she still does teach them now, the language classes. So we have had them. She started them when the pandemic started. And she started culture classes. She said, we're going to stay together, and not let this pandemic. So we started having these Zoom classes. And there's quite a bit of Anishinaabe people that are taking the classes now. And not all of the people taking the classes are Ojibwe people. Anybody can take the classes.
Right.
So it's been fun to have these classes and watch my nieces especially. They make these little charts and they hold them up in the little pictures of, the different animals, like, here's the eagle, Migazi, the bald eagle, or the golden eagle, they have the different pictures and stuff for the stuff. It's been interesting to keep things going during the pandemic.
Right. I know the pandemic has been so hard on Native people, tribal communities, elders, language speakers who happen to be elders, that we've also lost. So it's also nice to know that the technology in many ways has been able to bring communities together despite the devastation of the pandemic.
Yeah, she's almost 90.
Wow.
And she's doing these Zoom classes.
That's amazing.
Her best friend just turned 100.
Oh my goodness, and they're on their computers doing Zoom language, Ojibwe language.
Isn't that cool?
That is really amazing.
It's really neat to see the technology keep going. And for my grandson, the pandemic was actually pretty cool for him because he's hearing impaired. So he could do closed captioning. Okay. So it was the first time in his life that he was actually participating in the classroom groups. Right. Because he could read what was going on. So he was more part of the classroom than he'd ever been before. Right. So there's all different ways to look at the way learning went. Right.
And recognizing that a lot of students, even like your grandson, learn better in an online format with different options versus physically being in a classroom.
I mean, but he missed the company of other kids. So now that he's gone back to school, we've taken in some of the classrooms to keep that closed captioning going.
Oh, good.
In some of his classrooms. Good. So him to be able to participate still.
Good.
In an IEP. So, yeah, it's cool.
It is. It's this technology drives us nuts, but it's also been so nice. Like to connect with you today, for example, from Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly.
So thinking about your time in Robbinsdale schools and in the New Hope Crystal area, it sounds like you knew many other Native families in the region.
I knew the ones through the schools. It was very difficult to sometime right in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I got the cops called on a lot.
So you were talking a little bit about knowing families through the Robbinsdale schools, but not necessarily in the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, that in the neighborhood it was harder because my son, I think, got started in the yard because it came naturally to the yard.
Mm-hmm.
Then the neighbors, oh, she's got something growing in her yard, and the police showed up and, oh, you can't grow this kind of a plant in your yard. And they thought first I was growing some sort of illegal plant. And, it's like you can't have things that are naturally growing in your yard. You had to have this green stuff. And my next door neighbors say, oh, we use this Roundup chemicals on our grass, and I wouldn't use chemicals on my yard. And, I just had lots of issues like that about where I wanted to have a safer kind of yard, and I couldn't grow any plants in the back because the water washed down. It was like my house was in the side of the hill. Mm-hmm. So the rains came and all the chemicals would wash into the back of the yard. So I tried to grow stuff in my front yard, and then everybody wanted to complain. Even though I had beautiful flowers and all these beautiful gardens, no, you have to have it look like certain ways.
Right, this manicured green grass.
Yeah, and they want you to put these chemicals on, and I wouldn't do it, And that was very difficult. That was very sad.
Right.
That was the final straws of why I left my beautiful house and everything, because I got tired of being harassed by the one neighbor. I couldn't take it anymore.
Right. I'm sorry to hear that experience. In doing these interviews, that's something that's actually come up, is harassment or racism from neighbors and kind of pushing back against the white neighbor's desires for a perfectly green grass and to care for the environment and allow wild and native plants to grow.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you had a house with beautiful flowers. So when you were living in the Crystal, New Hope area, were you a homeowner or did you rent?
No, I at first I had rented an apartment, and then I had bought that home. That home I was buying for 22 years.
Wow.
That was my home. Yeah. But that's a whole nother story about that home. So that's a sad story. I don't know. I had cancer, and I put the home in the trust for my kids, and the trustee sold the home out from underneath me.
Oh, no. So you were forced to move?
Yeah. And that's why we've been kind of moving around since then, the last few years, until we settled here for now. So I figure out what to do. That's
hard, a place where you've lived for so long.
Yeah, it was almost paid for.
Yeah, that really is really an unfortunate and sad thing to have happen. I'm sorry to hear that.
But you know, but it is what happened.
Right.
So I was just trying to protect my kids, but I trusted the wrong person. So
Yeah.
she was not a Native person. She was a person advertised as a trustee person. So
Was a criminal.
yeah.
Yeah. That's really sad. I feel like with the way things are now, there's a lot of this kind of fraud going on where people are intentionally deceiving others, and you know, you're a good woman caring for your family, now your grandson, and to be taken advantage of like that is really awful.
Well, that's something I'm still trying to figure out. I need to find a lawyer or something and figure all of this out. And
right. And these things don't happen overnight either.
No, but I had, you know, I'm alive. I mean, and I went through a lot with the cancer and used a lot of traditional medicines and traditional ceremonies, and fought for a lot of years. And I'm just really blessed to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here too.
So
I mean, even with that really horrible circumstance and losing your home like that, you know, you have your health and you are still here, and that's what's most important.
Yeah, that's it. And, you know, that area, there are spots where we used to go, and I take my son especially. He's really good. We would go gather medicines. You know, in that area that you're talking about. You know, there's still spots that were natural where you could go get medicines and stuff. And that's something, ever since I was little tiny girl, I remember my grandma teaching me, you know, about medicine plants. So that's something I grew up learning about, and I continued to do it even after I came to Minnesota. And still continue to do it, and go to Wisconsin to do it still, gather or up north. And you know, there are some good areas there.
Yeah, despite all the environmental impacts we've been enduring.
Yeah.
It's nice you're able to connect like that with the natural world. Yeah. Did you have any family nearby when you were living in this area?
No, I didn't.
So you have shared that you worked in the Indian education program with Robbinsdale School District, but you also mentioned some work with the Census Bureau. So are these two separate jobs you had? Did you do them at the same time? Did you have to travel for work at all?
Oh, they were separate jobs. So, my first job was being as an artist, I think. And I just did the census job just to travel up here, to have a job, to transition from Michigan to Minnesota. So, and then because I was trained as a teacher, so when I first came here, I was and in Lansing, I was, gosh, I know I did all sorts of crazy stuff, but in Lansing, I was at the YWCA. I was assistant rec director there, so I taught classes there, and I also had a TV show that I did for the Y. So when I came up, and I did a bunch, it was just like doing documentaries. It was just one of the passions that I had. So when I came up here, I was working for Twin Cities PBS. And then I was teaching at Augsburg.
Oh, wow.
I was teaching dance exercise and weightlifting at Augsburg. And then I was working at PBS for the television. And I did a little bit of the pledge drive stuff there too. But mostly the stuff I was doing was behind the scenes and stuff. So I liked doing that. And then I was teaching at over South Minneapolis. I forget the name of the school. I was teaching art classes there when I first got pregnant with my daughter and moved out to Plymouth.
Okay.
So I was still teaching at that time.
Yeah, one of the other participants in this project teaches at Augsburg currently.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He's the director of the American Indian Studies program there. So I think he'll be at the event next Saturday, so maybe you'll have an opportunity to meet him as well.
That'll be neat. Because when I was in school, they didn't even have American Studies. I remember picketing at Lansing Community College in Michigan State to have them start American Indian Studies.
Mm-hmm.
We picketed for Martin Luther King Day too, but we picketed to get American Indian Studies started, back then. They didn't even have it. So when I started doing the stuff you saw at the Historical Society, then I was doing that curriculum that I developed when I was helping out with the drum and dance group and the stuff at Robbinsdale District. Then I kind of developed that curriculum that could be adapted from K through 12, and also presented at several universities. So I went from doing like classrooms to doing presentations, to doing larger presentations at places. And we used to do a lot about getting culturally appropriate books and things into the schools and getting that kind of things published and working in that area.
Right.
Then there wasn't so much like we have now.
Right.
So that was my goal back in the 90s, and
But you've done good, because having grown up in the Twin Cities and even lived in Crystal, I feel like the Robbinsdale School District is pretty well known for their Indian education programming today.
So, well, that's good.
Yeah.
And I had like a $20,000 grant for books for the district at one time. To put good books in their schools and everything. So
when you think about the Bassett Creek area, and thinking about it as a Dakota place, do you feel like you relate to that region as a Native person? And thinking about that history that's there?
You can feel it. You can feel it. And when you go out, if you go away, I can't say you can feel it. I should say I can feel it, like when we would go out for medicines, that there are parts where you can feel that are very ancient, that you can feel the oldness to the earth that are still there. I believe that that's a big piece of what brought me here, that brought me to that area, is what I could feel, that attachment to the area. I don't know how far west it goes that you're talking about, but there are places there that I would go just for healing, in that area that weren't exactly public places, but they were not built up either. And we would go there and heal. Could feel it.
When I think about the Bassett Creek watershed, I think about, it empties into the Mississippi River, but it begins west, nearer towards Plymouth and Minnetonka. which is an area that you lived in as well.
Because right around Medicine Lake, right around Medicine Lake is really, really strong. There are places there where we would sneak into, but were very healing, were very ancient spots where I would take my babies to heal, to be connected with the earth kind of feeling.
Yeah. And Bassett Creek, flows through Medicine Lake.
Does it? I'm not really sure what that is, but that's the part. That's what brought me there, was being out there by Medicine Lake.
Right.
And that's where I always stayed. Like when I was looking for a place, I said, now I have to stay within these area, within distance to this, is what I would told the realtors. You have to stay within the school district area. That's pretty cool.
It is. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see a map of this watershed. So let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger for you. So this is the Bassett Creek watershed area, and you can see Medicine Lake right in the center, and then Bassett Creek flows right out of it through Golden Valley. So you lived in Plymouth at one point, which is where Medicine Lake is located. And then you moved to the Crystal New Hope area over here. So you've been in this Bassett Creek watershed during that time.
Yeah. And it was further south down there, right closer to the river in Golden Valley where we would go get medicines.
Yeah.
Off back there before it got to the parkway.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Before the train tracks.
Yeah.
That's where we would go down in there. And then, over there by Medicine Lake on the 169 on that northeast side of it. We would go back up in there, too. You're not really supposed to be allowed to go in those areas, but
so this is,
you have to get medicines.
So this is interesting, thinking about coming to this place as an Ojibwe woman, but feeling that connection as a Native person in general, and being able to find your medicines as well.
Yeah. We did that. I would take them out and we would go get them.
So kind of on the flip side of that question, how did living in this area, in a West Metro suburb that's a predominantly white community, impact or influence your identity or sense of belonging, if at all?
I didn't feel so much like I belonged to that. My daughter, she had a hard time. She wanted to be more of that.
Like more involved in the
she
cultural?
She wanted to be more like them, like the white people. That's her life. She doesn't want to be part. Nowadays, she doesn't want to have anything to do with Native culture at all. So, I don't know. There's been things that, once my mother passed away, there's been things that my uncle has said that has put my whole background or my whole knowledge of who I am in question.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I don't even know anymore some of the things that I grew up knowing. The things that he says they don't make sense.
Right. So, being in a suburb, it sounds like was hard for your daughter, and thinking about her identity in particular and where she belonged, and in many ways she separated herself from in the Native community.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she has, totally.
And now you've also been thinking about your own family history and belonging as well.
I'm in my birth family. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Families are complicated, I am learning as well. I mean, I've known it, but as I get older, recognizing a lot of the historical traumas as well that we carry in our families.
Yeah, it's hard. I didn't realize before how strong blood memories are, or epigenetics, and that whole field now that has come so strong. And that's why I think the DNA testing is so prevalent right now, with so many people searching, trying to find things out about them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I'm lucky to have a strong adopted family. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky to have strong people that care about me, and I care about them, and I stay close to them. And I can't negate something that I grew up with. I can't change that parts of me. We grew up traveling a lot. But I remember dancing my first powwow when I was 6, the summer I turned 7. So I grew up doing that. How do you change that knowing? Or what? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just keep doing the best I can.
Right, that's all we can do. Yeah.
I know that there's a Dakota woman, a young woman now, that's doing a lot of things to identify that Dakota land, and bringing the Dakota walk and names to the area, that in a strong way with the Dakota language. In that area that you're working in, all the way through the Indian Mountains and the stuff over into St. Paul, much further east of where your project is. And I think it's good. I think it's good to people are recognizing that history is there.
Right.
I think that's good, but that still is not going to take away all the money and all the wealth and everything that's been built up on top of it.
Right. I think a lot about that in my own work and the history of dispossession of Native people. This project is centering on the West Metro Dakota homelands, but the same story unfolded across the entirety of the United States, and how that loss of land directly impacts people's access to housing and home ownership today, and that generational wealth that is then carried through home ownership too.
Yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, I know you and your children were really involved in the Robbinsdale schools and that you helped create the drum and dance program for other youth and families as well. But were there other cultural activities that you were involved in the area outside of the school district? Did you ever go to Minneapolis for any cultural activities or programming? Or did you ever return to your home reservation or tribal communities to participate in cultural events?
They didn't. Yeah, we did a lot with Minneapolis and even into St. Paul, in the whole Twin Cities area, for events and powwows, and there was just so many things that they had to offer here that they didn't have. They didn't used to have the powwows and stuff like this in Michigan. Even Michigan State didn't have the powwows. They're not as old as they are here in the Twin Cities, what they have here. Even the Indian Center for Lansing was an old broken down house. We would sit and bead, but it wasn't the same kind of opportunities. We were at the Indian Center. We were at the different schools, powwows in north through Anoka, Hennepin, east over to the Red School in St. Paul. There were different ones that we went to. And I'd take the kids and we would go to the one they used to have on New Year's Eve. They used to have one on some of the different holidays, like Thanksgiving. There used to be one. There would be a place to go to because I didn't want to raise my kids teaching them false holidays.
Right.
I didn't want to raise them doing that. I just really have an issue with that. Even with Mother's Day and Father's Day and all of this wealth and expectations that go into these fake holidays, I just take issue with that. But there used to be a lot of things that you could go and do more so within the community. And we used to go do that. And enjoy doing that with my kids.
Yeah.
It's hard when they grow up.
It is.
But I get to take my grandchildren to some of it now. So we'll go to the Wild Rice Festival, and we do things more with the St. Croix Band. Now, not so much into the inner city.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary now. That's really taken a change. What's going on?
Yeah. And it sounds like the St. Croix community is pretty accessible to you, too. Easy to get to.
Yeah, it has been. It is. We say, yeah.
So Hahawakdan is the Dakota name for Bassett Creek. What do you think about the role and importance of language and place names? Native place names.
We have a whole lot more of them already than people really understand, that they're really there. And I think it's been good as they've changed like names over in the cities. They've changed names. I think it might be good to remind people where the land really is.
Right.
Have the right names to it. I think that's really important.
So this project, this oral history project, grew out of a land acknowledgement statement and process. What do you think about land acknowledgements that we see so many institutions and organizations adopting today?
I have mixed feelings on that. I really do. I mean, I will admit I don't totally understand land acknowledgments. There is like, okay, are you saying that you understand now that you stole this land?
Mm-hmm.
And this land doesn't really belong to you? That this land came drenched in blood? Or what are you really saying when you're acknowledging this land, the land back, land, I'm not really sure that I understand the whole issue that surrounds the land acknowledgement program. Are they're going to have an event and they say we are this church and I have an issue with church because churches killed so many children. There's so much death and there's so much grief that has come from children or from them that say you must think like us, or you can't eat, or you can't have this, or we're only going to feed you if you believe like us. And so you're going to acknowledge that the land that you're on was stolen, and you're going to honor the people you stole the land from, but what are you really trying to do here? Are you trying to absolve yourself?
Right.
Of what your ancestors did? Or we know that it wasn't you per se that did it, but then when you come through with all the blood memories that come along, and the whole issue of what I'm stuck for a word right here. But what are they trying to say?
Right. Like by doing a land acknowledgement that doesn't absolve you or your predecessors' actions and violence, right?
Yeah. It doesn't.
So are there any particular actions that you think must accompany a land acknowledgement statement to move beyond just the words in an ideal world?
We're in an apocalypse. How can we're in an apocalypse right now. We're so far from that, that there's got to be more of a respect. I think there has to be a respect for the other person's culture and being, without them having to convert to their ways of being to go along with this land acknowledgement. You don't have to pray, you don't have to act, you don't have to be in the same way as this faith does in order to be part of this land.
Right.
Am I making sense?
Right. I think you are. I'm hearing you talk about like the assimilation process, which in many ways is still ongoing, right?
Right.
When we think about who has access to places, the freedom to worship, the freedom to speak your own language, the freedom for Native students to have an eagle feather at graduation, which, is something that we do annually, the freedom to have your hunting and fishing rights.
All those things, that you would thought were taken care of in the 1978 Freedom of Religion Act, or in Federal Law 280. But those really were just words that really didn't happen.
Right.
Before that, in 78 freedom of religion, you couldn't be in a sweat lodge without it being burnt down. But now I couldn't have a sweat lodge on my house in my land in Crystal without being mocked and without having the police called on me for having a legal fire in my backyard. And the police told my neighbors, no, her fire is legal. She has abided by all the laws here. But yet I was still harassed, So there are things that even though it says by law we are able to do it, we are still being harassed upon, and we still are not allowed to do them.
Right.
And even though these people are saying, well, we understand that our church is built upon your land, but you need to pray like this, and you need to come to church on Sunday, and you need to wear clothes like this, and you need to be like this in order for us to really welcome you, and in order for us to feed you, in order for us to say you're equal to us, without us saying like, oh, look at us helping this poor person and giving them a handout. In order for them to not be thinking that they're better than, and putting that out there like that. Oh, we're so helping and being subservient. No, there's not that same level of respect there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, land acknowledgements need to be more than words on the paper, and to do the reparative work, and to build those equal relationships, recognizing the harm that's been done in the past.
Yeah.
Coming back to the Bassett Creek and the watershed, do you have any thoughts on the environmental management of the water, the river, the creek, and the watershed today? How would you like to see it cared for?
I would like to see them outlaw some of those chemicals that these people are putting out, even the ones that they put along the train tracks, to keep the stuff from growing on the trains. Those wash down into the areas where the medicine plants grow. And the neighbors use the Roundup, and then on the other side you see, if you got cancer from the Roundup, then you can qualify for it. But they're still selling it on the shelves, and they're still putting it in the yards. They're still putting this, they don't take care of what it is there. They're still putting mass amounts of poisons into the area, and those poisons still find their ways back into waterways.
Right. Like, we need to pay more attention to chemicals than just the human impact. We need to care for the more than human world too.
Yeah. But places that were natural, you have to keep natural areas natural too. You can't just be stripping everything. That would be the other thing that I would love to see, is them to stop stripping all the areas, to keep their areas that are natural, and perhaps let more areas go back to being natural, go back planting more trees, planting more things, that bringing back the life, to bring back the more of the balance that we need.
Well, that brings me to the end of all of my official questions. Is there anything that you would like to share that we may have missed?
Have I shared too much? It would be nice if we could live together peacefully.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm glad to see you doing work like this.
Thank you.
I really am. And I really hope. I remember that there was a lot of awareness and there were a lot of people. I remember when I would do some presentations and I'd wonder why, like a senior citizens group or, would want me to come and do presentations. Mm-hmm. And they would say, well, we knew what we were taught was wrong. We just never knew what was right.
Mm-hmm.
We never knew the right information. And I do believe that there's a lot of people out there that do want to know what the right information is. Not everybody is like that horrible next door neighbor that I had.
Right.
No, not everybody is like that. And some people really do want to know what's right and know how to respect it. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the people that we give our energy to, and together those people together more. Those are the ones that to focus on, not the other ones,
right?
Not the haters, but the ones that really never had a chance to find out what's really going on. Mm-hmm. And they say, okay, is this what they want? If this is a way that I can, show respect, then just let me know. Mm-hmm. So I can do it. And let's all feast together. Mm-hmm. And go forward. And I think that has more positive ways for us to all move forward in a land restoration way.
Right. And I'm hoping that through this project too, bringing members of the community together in a really positive and uplifting setting is helpful too. Just folks getting to know each other and to tear down some of those past walls that have been built up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really excited for the celebration next weekend. And if you're able to attend, which it sounds like you should be, to also introduce you to some of the other participants in this project. I've heard so many similarities across these interviews. Lots of you have had really nasty neighbors, which is extremely unfortunate. But I think it points to what it's like to be a Native person living in a white suburb, right? And the racism that we still endure. Lots of commonalities about the care and love for the environment as well. Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Thank you for listening. This project may serve as a model for other communities that seek to go beyond land acknowledgement. To learn more about this oral history project, please contact Hennepin History Museum. The project was produced following the standards and principles of the Oral History Association. In addition to this podcast, the interview recordings, transcripts, and narrator files included signed legal released agreements can be found at the Hennepin History Museum. Funding and other support was provided by the St. Anthony's Falls Heritage Board, Hennepin History Museum, Valley Community Presbyterian Church, and the University of Wisconsin. This publication was also made possible in part by the people of Minnesota through a grant funded by an appropriation to the Minnesota Historical Society from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Any views, findings, opinions, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this publication are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent those of the state of Minnesota, the Minnesota Historical Society, or the Minnesota Historic Resources Advisory Committee. Anaya chopta pecha wopira unkenichiapi. Thank you for listening.